Hi, I'm Laura D'Aquino and I'm the Finance Journalist at Eureka Report. I'm here with Sandra Buckley, who's the CEO of Women in Super. Thanks for joining us today, Sandra.
You're welcome, Laura.
At Eureka Report, we're very passionate about bridging the superannuation gap, and I know that that's your core aim at Women in Super as well.
At Women in Super, I guess we say there are 5 key measures that we think can be done to make a big difference to the gender super gap. One of those is, of course, getting rid of the 450 monthly threshold for superannuation. So obviously this is the threshold beyond which you actually earn your compulsory superannuation. We've got a lot of women who earn more than 450 a month, but they don't earn it from one employer, which of course is part of the criteria for getting compulsory superannuation. So we are absolutely in favour of getting rid of it. If we got rid of it, then automatically a lot more women would receive the compulsory superannuation and would have access to some form of superannuation savings. Likewise, another policy that doesn't exist that we think should, because we think it's right and fair, is super on paid parental leave. So the same way that you receive superannuation when you have take your annual leave or when you're on sick leave, we also believe that you should be entitled to superannuation as part of your paid parental leave. The third factor that we talk about at Women in Super is where our Make Super Fair campaign will sort of strategically, I hope, focus on, is that we believe that there should be a redistribution of the tax concessions. So every time as a country we look at those tax concessions, the issue that we have is any tweaking that's done is often done at the top end, but doesn't actually redistribute those tax concessions down to the lower end. So 1 in 2 working women earn less than $37,000 a year, yet women do not benefit from any of the tax concessions at that lower end. They get a tax rebate, but they don't get a tax concession. So we would like to see a fairer redistribution of the tax concessions so that we enable low-income earners to effectively accumulate sufficient super, rather than over 50% of the tax concessions at the moment go towards the top end. So we'd like to see that redistributed down to the other end. Another issue that we have that we would love to see reintroduced is the gender impact statement. So every budget that was produced in the past had a gender impact statement attached to it, which meant from our perspective, you could actually look at the advantages and disadvantages of every policy, whether that was tax or social or economic, and analyse the benefits or otherwise that would have for both women and men. So a lot of policies affect women very differently to men. Women have very different working patterns to men, part-time working, casual working. Women have caring responsibilities. So if you actually looked at the impact or the gender impact and analysed that before you introduced a policy, then perhaps you wouldn't introduce that same policy.
Yeah.
And that was a knock-on effect of the LISTO, in fact. The LIST, because it was originally introduced, the low-income super contribution, that ended up benefiting women because more working women had or earned $37,000 or less, but it wasn't actually a policy that was brought in to advantage women. It just had that as a side effect. So when the government talked about repealing the Mining Act and as part of that the LISC, we fought very strongly to retain that because we obviously knew by then that so many women were actually being advantaged by having the rebate repaid on their compulsory superannuation contributions.
Communication across the board, from what we've observed, just isn't right. It's not cutting through. So it seems like communication really needs to improve across the board, and that might, be about bringing up financial literacy as well. Yeah.
I mean, definitely superannuation is not part of the curriculum at schools at the moment. And in fact, my son is about to do a subject on investment and the economy, which I think is fantastic. But when I looked at what that covered, the one glaring sort of obvious thing that should be there that's not there is superannuation. And when you think about the fact that one of the biggest assets that we will have going forward next to our house, if Australians continue to own their own house, so for those who don't own their own house, superannuation will be the largest asset. So for the majority of Australians, their largest asset is not even something that they're learning about when they are at school. So I think that's definitely something that we would like to see corrected. And obviously from the perspective of girls at school, it is incredibly valuable to teach all children the value of compound interest. I think Warren Buffett, and I'm sure you've heard this from other people, Warren Buffett calls it the 8th wonder of the world. So when you're in your 20s or 30s, you don't think about your retirement. It's something that's too far away in the future, not something you're worried about. But if we were to teach our children that, of course, every single dollar that you put away today will be worth so much more at retirement, just simply due to the benefits of compound interest. I mean, that alone would help many, many people think about what they need to do and do a lot more earlier in their life rather than at the later stages. It's so much harder to catch up when you're in the 50s and 60s and you've missed the boat when it comes to the magic of compound interest. We also think, obviously, that there's a lot out there about superannuation. If you look at any of the superannuation fund websites, they have got a vast array of information around women and superannuation and what women could be doing more of and what women need to know more about, which is all great. The government itself has a fabulous ATO website and InvestSMART website with information. But rightly, Laura, as you say, people, if they do access those websites, they can find out the information if they know where to go and where to look. But the big issue that we know surrounding the gender super gap is that financial literacy alone certainly won't solve the gap. It's much more complex than that, and if you don't have the income to put away on a weekly basis or a reasonable amount of income to put away, then you certainly aren't going to be able to take advantage of any of the tax concessions that are out there, and you won't be able to accumulate sufficient superannuation for your retirement.
So essentially it does start with the government, and we have to look to government policy to change first, and we can't just expect the individual to make up for it themselves by putting more money in and becoming more financially literate. You know, like you mentioned before, that you need to give more tax concessions to people earning onto that 37,000 mark. And to me, it seems from my research that there needs to be more of this passive strategy to solve the super issue rather than relying on active intervention. Like, I know that there's some great new developments in spouse super sharing, catch-up contributions, but you also it needs to come more from a policy level, that it's automatically built in.
We were certainly in favour of reducing the annual tax, the concessional contribution rate, which was reduced from 35 to 25,000, because that is in a policy measure that only actually is affecting 3.5% of the entire Australian population who has a superannuation account. So we would say that is a measure that benefits a very small percentage of the Australian population, and therefore what we would rather see are policies that are at the other end that help the majority of the working Australians. And you mentioned the fact that it's a sort of a passive strategy in tax concessions. Well, in fact, if you earn $37,000 or less, you aren't actually getting a tax concession. What you are getting is a rebate on the tax that you have paid on your compulsory superannuation contribution, because your marginal rate of tax is actually lower than the tax that automatically is deducted from your superannuation contributions. So therefore, if you earn $37,000 or less, you're not getting a tax concession. And that will be part of our campaign going forward under Make Super Fair, is that we believe it's right that all Australians should be entitled to tax concessions. And we would like to see the government go beyond just simply giving low-income earners a rebate and actively saying to the government, what we would like you to do is to look at this and to to give a contribution to those accounts that are under a certain balance, and to those who earn under a certain amount of money, because clearly, if we're going to spend as much as we are on superannuation tax concessions, we need to be spending it where we're going to get the most out of it, and to those who actually genuinely need some help in accumulating the superannuation. And I think it's a question of priorities too. Do we want to spend a small amount of money now in our tax concessions, or do we want to spend a large amount in 20, 30, 40 years' time, when we know that so many Australians are going to be retiring with little or no super? In fact, 1/3 of women will retire with no superannuation currently, and that's unlikely to change going forward. So do we want to make that the norm, that 1/3 of women retire with no super, or do we actually want to prioritise and say, that's not fair, we need to do something to enable those who do not earn sufficient to take advantage of those tax concessions to actually receive some form of contribution to the superannuation accounts?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sandra, for proposing some great ways to solve the super gap. We're hoping that it's solved ourselves as well. I'm Laura DeQuino. I'm the finance journalist at Eureka Report.
Did you know that your membership gives you access to InvestSMART, Intelligent Investor and Eureka Report? Just use your original login details on all 3 sites, or go straight to investsmart.com.au, where you'll find all of our content, no matter where it's published first.